before we do that, let's go ahead and get into the news. All right, so the first story I have today is nearly half of the nation's tap water contains PFAS, a new study finds. Americans living in urban areas are at most at risk. Nearly half of the tap water in the United States is estimated to have at least one type of polyfluoroalkyl substance, or PFAS. A new national study from the U.S. Geological Survey released Tuesday. The group of chemicals commonly used in consumer products like nonstick cookware linings of fast food boxes have been linked to human illnesses like cancer, low birth weight, and thyroid disease. The agency claims it's the first comprehensive study of its kind on unregulated private wells, giving average consumers information about the risk of PFAS. And when they grab a glass of water from their kitchen sink, said Kelly Smalling, the study's lead author and research hydrologist. It kind of begins to give private users information on some of the exposure risks. The government agency found through the research that the concentration of PFAS were similar between public supplies and private wells. The study shows that Americans living in urban areas are most at risk, while those living in rural areas are less at risk. So this isn't just in the public water supply. This is happening even if you have your own private well.
Gross.
Yeah, it's concerning. Yeah, I mean, the story goes on. Cancer fears. Compared to a 75% likelihood of PFAS being detected in water in urban areas, there's a 25% chance the chemicals will be found in water in rural areas. 75% chance of being detected in urban areas. So, this is something, I think we're seeing the payoff of all this technology and things that we switch to without knowing the long-term effects, the ramifications of that. Did you hear the story this week about aspartame, Allison? Did you hear any stories about that? The government has now made aspartame a carcinogenic. They've acknowledged that it's cancer causing.
So why are they still putting it in everything?
Well, I think that might change. I think that the story I read is that it might spell the end for like Diet Coke, or Diet Coke will start using whatever is in Coke Zero or whatever, moving on to the next artificial sweetener. But so much of, how many Americans are drinking Diet Coke? And then, not just Coke, but any kind of, using artificial sweeteners in their coffee and all kinds of stuff. So, interesting. So not good news. The next story is Earth hit an unofficial record high temperature this week and stayed there. Sweltering heat is blanketing the planet, and the past 7 days have been the hottest week on record, the latest grim milestone in a series of climate change-driven extremes. Earth's average temperature on Wednesday remained an unofficial record high, set the day before, and for the 7-day period ending Wednesday, the daily average temperature was 0.08 degrees Fahrenheit, higher than any week in 44 years of record keeping. According to data from the University of Maine's Climate Reanalyzer, a tool that uses satellite data and computer simulations to measure the world's condition, the average global temperatures for Tuesday and Wednesday was 62.9 degrees Fahrenheit. That follows a short-lived record set on Monday at 62.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The Climate Reanalyzer figures are unofficial but significant data and an indication that climate change is reaching uncharted territory. So more bad news for our news segment today.
All bad news today.
We live in similar parts of the world, Allison. I would imagine you felt the heat like we have been here recently. I mean, it has been hot. And I'm in the Mid Atlantic in Virginia, and you always deal with the summer humidity, but like the last 2 days have been like, well, I'll put it this way: my cat Runa loves to go outside, and we just moved, so we haven't really been letting her outside yet because we're not sure, like we're not settled in to know that she's good here yet. But she sneaks out the door sometimes, like any cat with a master plan. And normally she sneaks out and she'll be gone for like 3 or 4 hours, and then she'll come back. Here lately, she's been like, she'll be out for like 15 minutes, and then she'll be like waiting at the door, panting, like waiting to come back in. So It has been absolutely brutal.
It's hard to get them to drink water too.
Yeah.
Cats don't really drink that much water.
Yeah, which is yeah, and I've read that too. Like they get like in nature they get most of their water intake from the meat that they eat. So, but yeah, Lou says it's been ungodly in the north. Hoaxer says I'm from PA. It was incredibly hot. I can tell the difference. Yeah, it's been sweltering. I had just started running. I was like, I have a nice place to run now, and it's like I'm gonna start getting some runs in, and I got 3 runs in, and then I was going like every other day, and then like the last 3 days I've just been like, absolutely not. And I don't get up early. I'm not gonna do that. I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and run. Like I'll run at like 11 or in the evening, and it's just been.
I mean, it's dangerous too, because I mean, like heat exhaustion just happens like that. You're sweating and you're hot, but then it takes a while to cool back down, and then you stop sweating and you think you're okay, but when you stop sweating, it's like not okay.
Yeah. And I can be pretty honest and say I'm not in shape. So like I'm not trying to go up there and go for like a nice little run and not come home and have heart attacks down the block somewhere for sure. So anyway, it's hot out there, so make sure you're staying cool, and we'll see what happens, because of course the long-term effects of this are possibly like globally disastrous storms, which I feel like we've been okay with over the last year. There hasn't been the hurricane season last year, I don't feel like was as bad as it had been, but
yeah,
new one's around the corner, so we'll see if we see any effects of that.
Yeah.
The next story is about the sun. A giant sunspot grew 10 times wider than Earth in just 48 hours, then spat X-class flares right at us. And this happens from time to time. If you're not familiar with the goings on of the sun, the enormous dark patch and its powerful eruption are both signs that the solar maximum is fast approaching and could be more active than expected. An enormous, rapidly growing sunspot on the sun's surface has unleashed a mighty X-class flare, the most powerful type of solar flare the sun is capable of producing. The solar storm slammed into our planet, triggering brief radio blackouts in parts of the U.S. and elsewhere, but it could have been a lot worse, experts warned. The enormous dark patch, named AR3354, emerged on the solar surface on June 27th, and within 48 hours had grown to cover around 1.35 billion with a B square miles, or 10 times wider than the Earth. Space weather scientists were alarmed by the colossal sunspot's rapid emergence. Space weather scientist. Who signed up to be that when they were in high school? Space weather scientist. That sounds like a fun job. Yeah, they were alarmed by the colossal sunspot's rapid emergence and feared it could spit out a barrage of potentially harmful solar storms, according to spaceweather.com. After growing to its full size, the sunspot produced a sizable M-class flare on June 29th, but then remained calm until July 2nd, when it belched out an X-class flare aimed directly at our planet. These are classified A, B, C, M, and X, with X, being the worst, and each being 10 times more powerful than the one before. So B is 10 times more powerful than an A, C and then finally an X is 10 times more powerful than an M. Radiation from a gargantuan X-class flare barreled into Earth's magnetic field and ionized the gases in the upper part of the atmosphere, turning the molecules into dense plasma. As a result, radio signals were scattered, causing radio blackouts in the western United States and parts of the eastern Pacific Ocean. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or the NOAA, the disruption lasted for around 30 minutes, but things could have gotten much worse. Researchers initially suspected that the flare could have launched a coronal mass ejection, a cloud of fast-moving magnetized plasma. If a coronal mass ejection from a flare this size hit Earth, it would likely cause major disruptions to Earth's magnetic field, known as a geomagnetic storm. This would have resulted in an even larger radio blackout affecting up to half of the planet, as well as potentially damaging satellites orbiting Earth and impacting powerful infrastructure on the planet's surface. But luckily, no CME was launched.
Wow. That sounds like we dodged a very big bullet.
Yeah, I remember, I remember some of the shows I've listened to talking about these probably since the late 90s. And I think one of the biggest fears I have of something like this is possibly, just frying all of our power grid. I'm a huge supporter of like spending the money on infrastructure to like bury our electrical lines and to kind of protect from EMPs, because that's essentially what that would be, is an EMP just on a magnetic proportion, like where computers and all that stuff just go bye-bye, which I think could have bigger ramifications than like very quickly. So anyway, yeah, we dodged a bullet, Allison. I guess we dodged a bullet. All right. So let's get into the alien stuff. The UFO stuff has been going crazy. When it kicked off a few months ago, well, over a year ago, but things have just been getting more and more and more intense. And this isn't necessarily just reports of UFO sightings, but what's going on inside the government. Washington gripped by UFO fever as senators speak their mind on the mystery. Several members of Congress have recently spoken out on the topic of UFOs and the secrecy surrounding it. Back in June, whistleblower David Grush made the startling claim that the U.S. government had been in possession of intact and partially intact vehicles of non-human origin. Now, I think it was CMC Air Boss who posted some of that story on our Discord previously, and we were talking about that a little bit, about whether he was believable or not. But this, coupled with other revelations and official discussions on the UFO phenomena, has led several prominent congressmen to speak openly about their own views on the mystery. Florida Senator Marco Rubio, for example, stated that he had been approached by several high-ranking government officials who claimed to possess intimate first-hand knowledge about the subject. He also criticized what he called the very problematic lawlessness concerning UFO crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs. There could be, in essence, some sort of internal military complex that's their own government and is accountable to no one, he said. It would be a huge problem if it's even partially true. During an appearance on ESPN, the sports network, analyst Pat McAfee sports talk show recently, Wisconsin Representative Mike Gallagher offered up the possibility that these objects could actually be an ancient civilization that's just been hiding here and is suddenly showing itself. He also suggested that they could be flown by humans who have traveled back in time from the future, but also admitted that his most pressing concern was whether or not they were evidence of advancing technology that had been developed by rival countries. I'm probably the most interested in whether it's adversary technology, particularly from China, he said, and even more for the next story. Congress doubles down on explosive claims of illegal UFO retrieval programs. Asked June 26 about allegations of secret UFO retrieval and reverse engineering programs, Senate Intelligence Committee Vice Chairman Marco Rubio made several stunning statements, some of which we had talked about before, talking about the high clearance and high positions, people with high clearance and high positions coming to speak to him about their firsthand knowledge of UFO related claims. This extraordinary language added to the Senate version of the Intelligence Authorization Bill mirrors and adds significant credibility to whistleblowers' recent stunning allegations that a clandestine, decades-long effort to recover, analyze, and exploit objects of non-human origin has been operating illegally without congressional oversight. So,
wait, what does that mean, operating illegally? Like, are these civilian people operating illegally, recovering crafts, or are they saying that the government is operating illegally?
well, I guess, what we're seeing here, specifically from Marco Rubio, and I guess also from Gallagher, Senator Gallagher, that they're talking about they're having people who have high government clearance who are coming to them and telling them that this is happening. And they don't know anything about it. So they're saying, okay, well, if I'm a U.S. senator and this is going on and we don't know about it, then more than likely these things are happening without the government's knowledge. So essentially they're saying this would be like there was a secret government inside the government.
Oh.
So essentially, I guess that's Marco Rubio saying, I didn't know this existed, but I have people on the inside who are telling me this is true. And I see CMC's in here. He did post this story we were talking about before. There are several military complexes that we don't know about. In most cases, we probably don't need to know because of the military's purpose, for sure. We don't need to know because the Chinese and Russians don't need to know. But I guess the main thing that I took out of these stories here is that we have definitely been put in a situation here that's very much different than what was just happening you could even just say 5 years ago, but definitely 20 years ago, 10 years ago, where if you spoke to someone who was an elected official in the U.S. government, they would laugh at you or, take some kind of jab if someone asked about UFOs. And now we seem to have U.S. senators who are alarmed and showing a disproportionate amount of interest in what's going on with this. So,
So we wanted disclosure this year, and we're kind of getting it.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's been the big question. The big question has been, is this disclosure, or are they somehow giving us a little bit of disclosure in an attempt to hide a bigger picture? And I've always been wary of disinformation as much as information. So that was one thing that we had talked about previous in our Discord. So feel free to join the Discord if you would like. There's all kinds of pages in there to talk about those specific topics.
But they would be putting disinformation out to distract us from whatever is really going on.
Yeah. I mean, whatever that is. I mean, but if they're willing to me, and I could be completely wrong. I could be reading this completely different because I've been, I've been interested in this for so long now. But to me, it's almost like, I mean, to me, it seems like the government has basically acknowledged to me, I just want to make sure I word this correctly. To me, it seems like the government has essentially acknowledged that there has been some kind of extraterrestrial crafts that have come to Earth and that they know it exists. Just because they've talked about this whole idea of they've talked about this whole idea of like, well, this technology, we have proof that this UAP sighting happened, and we don't have that technology, and none of our adversaries have that technology. So then what's left to believe at that point? If no one on Earth has that technology, then it has to be extraterrestrial or interdimensional or whatever. So then the question comes, well, what's the rest of the story, and why are they leaving that part out, and what, and so then, everything can run wild. So I don't know. I don't know what the goal here is. On one hand, I'm super happy that there's lots of more information and that the government is trying not to dissuade people or ruin people's careers about making reports about this. But I'm also curious about what the end game is, because even though they're releasing some kind of disclosure, it doesn't seem to be any kind of full disclosure. Like, they haven't just come out and said, yes, well, actually, we met with the Pleiadians in 1967, and
that's what I'm waiting for. Like, it feels like just a tease, or maybe even just a test. Like, let's see how people react to this, and ease the general population into it. And then they're going to come out and be like, we're all aliens.
Yeah.
The government's been aliens for the last 50 years.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? It just seems to get further. Like, as these news articles keep coming out, and like, I don't know what to think about about this, this guy who came out and, like, we know he was in the Air Force. We know he has a highly classified position. And then he comes out and says that not only has the U.S. retrieved crashed extraterrestrial vehicles, but that they've also recovered life forms. And this is being carried by all the major mainstream news media, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're all talking about it. It's front page news. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't even know what to think after a while.
When he first came out saying things, it made me think of Richard Doty and how he was kind of wishy-washy, going back and forth. Like, he admitted to disinformation, but now he actually does believe, supposedly, at least that's what I think his last stance was, is that, but it was originally that he was hired to plant disinformation amongst the UFO community. It's my understanding. It just makes me think of that. It feels like that. It feels like something's missing here. Like, somebody's not telling the truth.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I had kind of almost forgotten about Richard Doty. I had heard interviews from him from quite a long time ago. Probably back on Coast Coast AM with Art Bell and all that. And his name has come up a lot recently again. I saw he was on another program recently with Jimmy Church, and he's coming on to talk about that stuff. And then I was looking back into it again, and yeah, like, some people were saying that he was someone who specialized in putting disinformation out previously, but he's back on the radio shows talking now. So it'd be interesting to see what he has to say, I guess.
I didn't know that he was publicly speaking now again. So
Yeah.
I didn't know what his stance was.
Yeah, there's a guy named Jimmy Church. A lot of people might know, who at one point in time was like a guest host for Coast Coast AM, and he has his own program, which is successful. Actually, Cheryl Costa was on that show, who we had last time, and he was on just recently. So I don't know. Maybe we can have him on here. So if anybody knows how to contact Richard Doty. feel free to come on and tell us what's going on, because I can't make heads or tails of it right now.
Mhm.